There are more than 100 unique styles of beer, each with their own set of ingredients, process, guidelines, history, and experience. If you're a beer lover, an industry leader, or somewhere in between, a better knowledge of beer style will improve your life and your work.
Welcome to A Sense of Beer Style, essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. I'm Julia Herz.
And I'm Jeremy Storton.
We're advanced Cicerones, beer judges, home brewers, and we're excited to guide you through the vast and wonderful world of beer styles.
Welcome back to the Sense of Beer Style, everyone. Today we're talking about I'm going to use, Julia, you just used a term off air. This is a very squishy style. And I love that because and I made the comment, it's easier to talk about what this beer is not than what it is. But this is the Wild Specialty Beer. This is, basically it's the sour ale that does not fit into one of the European sour categories. It's just that random sour beer. And that's the best way I can describe this beer is it is it's one of the wild sour beers and some specialty ingredient type of thing in there. Julia, have you ever judged these at a competition?
Yeah, I have. And the guidelines are a great example of text on paper is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And we are instruments for what we perceive, but yet the spirit of what the text reflects is what we're after. So that's what I would say I keep in mind when I'm judging these.
Yeah, and I've judged these before as well. And the fun thing is, I think we had 12 different cups placed down in front of us. Each beer was a completely different color. They were barely alike each other. So to say we're judging these, it's like you're judging your favorite color out of the crayon box. They're so different and have such wonderful attributes in and of their own style. So this is kind of a squishy style to really talk about. So we're going to do our best to really land you on how to wrap your head around this. If you're judging it, if you have to study it, if you encounter this in the wild, pun intended, just to help better understand what this is. And a lot of these things we're going to refer back to the base style. So we're going to keep that as a granted term across this entire Stylecast is whatever the base style is, go back and reference that particular style cast just so you better understand that. But Julia, given that, let's just talk a little bit about some ingredients that we might see in this wild specialty beer.
Yeah, excellent. And I want to kind of add up the queuing before I talk about ingredients that Wild Specialty Beer for Beer Judge Certification Program 2021 guidelines that if you listen to Sense of Beer Style, Julia and Jeremy here, you know that's what we cover and follow for you. We're in the American Wild Ale category. And wild specialty beer is a subset of that. The wild specialty beer is literally designed for variants of other subcategories within the American wild ale style. So it's a base Brett beer, it's a mixed fermentation sour beer, it's a straight sour beer, but then it has addition of ingredients that will take it to a different place, right? Aged in certain barrels that had other types of spirits, wine, beverage in it that's going to influence the flavor. Addition of certain fruits, right? Because Brett beer, mixed fermentation sour, and straight sour, it's one upmanship from that. So just keep that in mind. It's kind of like a compilation style wild specialty beer for its companion cousin, brothers and sisters in the American wild ale category. So for ingredients, it can be virtually any style of beer, as Jeremy's talking about. I, for example, have one, and we're going to taste it, Distille out of Illinois. Can't wait, and it's a sour blonde ale. But wait, there's more. There's a lot more going on in that beer, and when I open it, we'll we'll talk about that. So any style of beer is the characteristic ingredient base for a wild specialty beer, right? There's step one. It can have Saccharomyces, a litany of fermentation or microorganisms, Brettanomyces, Lactobacillus, Pediococcus, right? It can have these things. And then the fruits that are added, commonly it's cherries or raspberries or peaches, but it can be other types of fruits too. And then the wood or barrel, because when you age a wine, you age a beer, you age a beverage, it doesn't have to sit in the vessel, but it often, with that, if you are steeping your wood and then adding it to the beer or sitting your beer in that vessel, this style calls for that vessel to have a more unique flavor beyond just oak. Say that barrel, for example, my distill is aged in oak, red and wine, white foeders, right? So red and white wine influence those oak aged foeders. So that's an additional flavor characteristic. And that is going to give it more unusual flavor that then tips it into this wild specialty beer category.
Yeah. So when we look at this, it's going to be kind of silly to talk about the appearance because, as I mentioned, when we're judging the stuff, it could be any color. I've seen them bright Kool-Aid orange. I've seen them pink. I've seen them rose colored. I've seen them olive oil colored. I've seen them brown. The color can be anything, and depending on the base style and how they choose to interpret it. It could be hazy, it could be not. It even says in the guidelines, clarity can be variable. That's an understatement. This whole style is variable. And head retention, it could be poor, it could be great. There's no set guidelines on what this beer should look like, and frankly, that's kind of part of the fun of this. It is the wild west of beer, pun intended again. This is, it could be anything. So don't put too much credence into what it's supposed to look like because there's no such thing as what it's supposed to look like at this point. But in your particular example, what are you smelling?
So the aroma is not as much about the base beer style because that somewhat becomes the background and the backdrop. It's more about the specialty ingredients that have been added and or potentially the type of wood or oak that has been influencing the beverage. So in this case, I've got, this, I said that's a sour blonde ale aged in oak, red and wine foeders. So I'm getting kind of a hint of, say, not a dense red wine like a Syrah or Zinfandel, but, more of a Pinot or Merlot kind of hit. And then they conditioned this beer on raspberries and blackberries. So I'm definitely getting red fruit character, right? I mean, it goes to blackberries, cherries, smells like overripe raspberries. It's just gorgeous. Like the aroma is incredible. And the style guidelines want the best example. Say you're judging this, say you're evaluating which one you want to buy a case of or whatever, that it blends the aromatics from the fermentation with the special ingredients. So don't forget, we mentioned the ingredients would have a kind of strata or a stepping, maybe a ladder or stepping stone version of different ways that it was fermented. So I am getting an essence of definitely not just Saccharomyces, which would maybe give me some esters or phenols, but I am getting some lactobacillus hints. You can't smell sour, but I'm getting volatile compounds that elicit, that yogurt, that sour kind of lemonade type of aroma. And that's just the start. I'll stop talking so I can taste it and Jeremy can talk about flavor.
Yeah, and again, it's you got a free range experience here, and it really goes back to how well do you know the ingredients? How well do you know the process? Because when we talk about what this beer should be, there's no such thing. This beer is going to be anything and everything. So this goes back to how well do you know the brewing process and what flavors we get out of the brewing process. Even flavors like bitterness and forgive me, Julie, I'll even touch on mouthfeel just for a brief sec. But even thinking about things like astringency, where does astringency come from? It can come from sparging with too hot of water, and you're getting a lot of those tannins from the grain husks. It could be using orange peel and getting a little bit of that pith. So you can get these flavors just from the different ingredients, different brewing process. So think about what's in it. If you have, for example, the berries like Julia's tasting, what would you associate coming along with those berries? A good example of the style, and we'll talk about them later, but Cascade Brewing in Portland, and as of this recording, have recently closed, and their fate is unknown at this point. But they made a name for themselves by creating the Northwest Sour, because they took the sour base and they added local fruits and everything. It was wonderful. One in particular was, I believe it's called Pistol Whipped, but they used a blonde sour base and used saffron in it as well. And so think about what flavors you get from saffron, what flavors you get from a blonde base, that lemony kind of slight breadiness, but it's balanced by that sourness, not necessarily by the hops. So this really takes what I call being a beer detective and thinking about, when you can identify the ingredients, when you know the process, you can start thinking about, this is what I think is going to, how it's going to manifest. And if it tastes anything different, then you can kind of work your kind of reverse engineer this beer and figure out what they did, what they put in it. And that's really the best advice from Uncle Jer is that's what you get from flavor, is you kind of have to be your own detective, particularly in the style. But let's get back into mouthfeel with Julia.
Which is an addition and a component of flavor, and
Yeah.
the guidelines break it out separately. And I love that the guidelines lean towards saying and lead with that it generally has a light body, or at least lighter than what the base beer style would be. I think that has to do with advanced conditioning, advanced aging for many of these, and advanced carbonation. So lighter body than you might expect for the base style is a good one to look for, and then moderate to high carbonation. I think the dry and refreshment factor is really important of every beer, and carbonation can certainly add to that. So in the case of my beer, even though it might look petulant, it's definitely more than just lightly prickly. It's got carbonation that's kind of drying the tongue out and making me ready for that bite of food, which is lovely. So tannins, Jeremy brought up, which is another component of mouthfeel. That grippiness, that kind of oversteeped tea bag in your teacup, biting the tip of a banana before you peel it, you immediately or your tongue dries out, and the polyphenols and tannins are extracting your saliva and drying things up. So you're getting a sense of the tannins, because obviously wood is often part of these beer styles, and so that presence will dry out the beer. And it will also help balance fat when you're pairing it with food. And then the mouthfeel can also be influenced from tannins from the fruit, right? The skins of fruit have tannins. So in my case of raspberries and blackberries, tannins from that fruit is definitely, especially since they were added in the conditioning stage, going to be a component of the fruit addition, not just the sugar, the color addition from that fruit, the sweetness, the flavor, but also the tannins. So I think that the body is a little drier in many of these examples because of the advanced carbonation, because of the advanced dryness aspect. They're better for pairing with food, and it's a light, beautiful style of beer to often find, and they're often not as high in alcohol as many other styles chosen, because the base styles are not usually booze bombs. In this case, can vary, but in my case, for example, it's 6.1% alcohol, which you might see this and think, oh, that looks like a wine, which is often these days 12 to 14%. So I'm very pleased with my 6.1% Dust Steel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I get style comparison. This is a trick, because there's so much variability. For those of you who are watching or listening to this just out of interest to know a little bit better, the best way I can describe the Wild Specialty beer compared to any other sour is this is going to be sour and somewhat funky, more so than a Berliner Weiss or a Gosa. It might even be more funky than a Flanders Red or Oud Bruin. but it's also going to have that addition of that fruit, that herb, that spice, maybe on wood. And so, if you have been watching these and listening to these, you might think, "Well, hey, Jer, how about we compare that to a fruited lambic?" Well, this is going to be a little bit more um, funky, a little bit more wild, uh, but there's a lot of overlap with those two. But this is going to have, not just raspberry and a framboise or a cherry for a creek. It could be wood aged. It could have saffron. It could have pumpkin, sour, funky beer. So it really could be anything. But keep in mind, there will be overlap with these styles. So this wild specialty beer is kind of like that catch-all of this wild uh, variation of a wild sour ale plus some other ingredient that's going to make it special, and that's kind of what this comes down to. Um, do you have any commercial examples you want to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say that if you are in the beer know, and if not, no worries. Every day is a journey, and we're here to bring you along. New Glarus, Wisconsin Belgian Red literally helped establish a institutional brewery that is only state distributed now. So people are flocking to Wisconsin in droves to go to this brewery and pick up their beers. And the fact that their Wisconsin Belgian Red is a commercial example for wild specialty beer is perfect, right? And they've made a name for themselves literally just with that beer, and then other amazing beers, Spotted Cow. The list is so long. But New Glarus, Wisconsin Belgian Red, if you ever come across that on a library list, a backlist, a seller list from one of your friends or an establishment or a brewery, drink it, buy it, get it, enjoy it, covet it. It's amazing. And then, the Lost Abbey out of California, Cuvée de Tame. That's actually a brown-based beer style. It does have Brettanomyces influence. It's very sour cherry influenced, and it's aged in bourbon barrels. That is an incredibly different pivot than, say, my sour blonde ale from Dustille with different fruit and whatnot, and yet it's a classic mainstay, amazing brewery to get. And Cuvée de Tame, Cuvée often means like the best, and Tame is Tommy Arthur of Lost Abbey and of Lost Abbey fame, so it's his best, right? So anything Cuvée, get, like covet, the Cuvée, the word covet, I guess, word of the day. So that is another great one. And then, Jester King's got examples. Jeremy brought up Cascade. They list some
Hmm.
examples there. Russian River Supplication. New Belgium definitely has examples, and one of them is listed in the style guidelines. So you are finding some of the best, the cuvee of each brewery, if they're making a beer in this style.
Yeah, and these are all great, but bottom line is go out and find these. These are special beers. These are, and it sounds like I'm wrapping up. I'm not, but these are special beers. They're meant for special occasions. They're meant for special celebrations. So go find these. I don't have any really vital stats to really talk about. It's all dependent on the base beer, dependent on the on how it manifests, and there's so much variability that I'm just going to skip over the vital stats on this. Like we said before, it can be anything and everything. So let's just more importantly, get right into the glassware and temperature that you'd like to see this in, Julia.
Yeah, and so I chose deliberately for the recording today my Tiku Tulip. I call it a triangle Tiku Tulip. Tiku is the brand.
Hmm.
I've done sensory, been sat through sensory demonstrations with this very glass. It is less porous. It does have nucleation sites at the bottom to kind of coax out that carbonation. So I think it's a great glass. There's a bump on the lip, so it kind of serves the palate and the mouth well as you drink it. There's a 4-ounce mark here because these are good for sipping and then splash a little more in the glass. So I just love the Tiku Tulip, and I want these beers not refrigerator cold, US 38 degrees Fahrenheit. But I would very much want them not too warm either because of that refreshment factor, because of that carbonation. So I'd want to serve this 42, 45 degrees, not, cellar temperatures like it's an English ale, but just slightly warmer than straight out of the fridge, because then the expression and the volatilizing of beautiful aromatics really has a chance to shine.
And for those of you Celsius folks, I think I would stick that probably in the 5 to 6, maybe 5 to 7 Celsius range to kind of go along with what you're saying. So chilled, but not warm. Maybe a cool, maybe a room temperature if you're in northern England, that kind of room temperature. But what would we pair with this? Again, there's so much variability. It's hard to be specific. So I'm going to be general. Um, Basically with these types of beers, I really want something savory and a bigger impact. Again, a lot of these beers are special occasion. These are not having a drink because at the end of the day, we're having one of these because it's a special end of the day. And so hence the special Teku glass. I want something along the savory side. I think beers like this would be great with grilled fire grilled steak and chimichurri sauce, or a risotto, or a paella. And I even had one of these beers that I was judging had the flavor profile that reminded me in the best way possible of a coconut Thai stew. It was very meaty. It was and it was the strangest flavor profile to experience out of a beer, but I loved it. And so by that, it's like, lean into that, enjoy that. Having a pad thai or a kind of a coconut curry stew type of thing, I think would be fabulous with these beers. What about you, Julia?
I love it. And I find myself going to kind of the beer pairing concepts where acidity certainly can balance fat. Salinity, salt in food can help emphasize and potentiate flavors in the fruit. So I want it with something fatty and salty. That is just a no-brainer to me. And then you're looking for synergies, links, hooks, bridges, echoes. You hear me say it all the time, with the predominant special ingredients. What fruit is in there, right? My Dastille with the raspberries and blackberries aged in oak, red and white wine foeders. Like, wow, let's have that with a raspberry cheesecake and see where it goes, because raspberry cheesecake's really dense, right? And it's got raspberries on it. So just find something that you think food-wise is going to complement the beer as much as the beer could complement the food. And it's no wrong answer. And if you, again, always in pairing, if you find yourself not getting a home run, 1 + 1 = 5, that's okay. The majority of pairings that I get are, that kind of middle of the road. Beer doesn't take away from the food doesn't take away from the beer, and they're still very enjoyable. That's your win. If you find that it's a train wreck, right, or like there's a clash, there's something that you really don't like in the kind of reaction that you have when you're pairing, note that. That's the learning moment and teaching moment. And then do it again and try to describe why. And then avoid that pairing in the future, but try to create that muscle and palate memory for what happened and why you think it didn't go the way you wanted.
Yeah. And if you're the type of person that's watching this show, then I'm willing to bet a beer that you are also that type of person that if a pairing doesn't work, that you're also inclined to try and figure out why and learn from that. And I mean, if anything, that's a better experience than having, oh, this was amazing, I got to have this again, because you have that knowledge and like, okay, I can break this down, figure it out, and let's confirm this, let's deny this, and let's move forward with a better understanding of how to pair and create a great experience for everyone. But along with that, this is a really fun experiment to do with the wild specialty beers. So go out and drink them. Enjoy.
Enjoy, y'all.
Thank you for listening to A Sense of Beer Style, the essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. With advanced Cicerones, me, Julia,
And me, Jeremy.
Tune into the next episode as we continue exploring the world of beer styles and what to make of them. We encourage you to listen to the prepisodes to build your foundation and better understand beer styles.
And before the next episode, I'd like to ask you to review the show and let us know what you'd like featured in upcoming episodes. Until next time, here's to you and your sense of beer style. Thank you for listening. Cheers.